Every time. Like it's all I can do not to start tearing up. Because I feel that song so much. And I have to feel it, because if I don't feel it, you don't feel it. And I felt it the day that I wrote it. I had to feel it, because if I didn't feel it, you wouldn't feel it. Which means I had to tell my story. Now, I didn't lose anybody in Afghanistan, and I don't drive a truck around to remember them. I doubt that anybody in here has that specific story, and few people all over the world, yet millions of people gravitated to that song because I utilized my powerful, very important story. See, when I wrote that, I imagined driving my dad's old 74 F-150. I imagined riding on Pleasant Road, the road in front of the house I grew up in. I imagined burning out in Tom Mortimer's field. Tom Mortimer was my neighbor. He owned a field across the street. I never burned out in anybody's field when I was 16. But if I would have, it would have been Tom's field. And I imagined I lost my brother. My brother's alive and well, but I imagined that my brother had died while I wrote that song. Why go through that? Why think about that? Because if I don't feel it, you don't feel it. Your story has the power to cause people to feel what you feel, and it connects with them, whether you realize it or not. Here's what's awesome, is that if I can take my simple little goofy life and write songs consistently that are my story, based on my story, so I can feel it, so other people can feel it, you can do the same thing. I'm not a genius by any stretch. I'm simply utilizing my story. Like if you and I were together and we were meeting each other for the first time and we were talking about whatever, we're talking about life, we're talking about our families. We might talk about my dad. I don't know the story of your dad. You like him, you love him, you don't like him, you never met him, he was an alcoholic. Doesn't concern me. All that's important is that I tell you my story. I wouldn't tell you I miss my dad, who's been dead for 35 years. I need to tell you I miss the man that taught me how to fish. That's my story. And if I tell you my story, you start seeing your story. I don't need to tell you I got kids at home. I don't need to tell you that my kids aggravate me. I need to tell you that if I hear another argument about who's better at Fortnite, I'm going to choke out one of my boys. That's my story. But if I tell you my story, you start seeing your story. You know, sometimes, I can tell you sometimes I struggle with, I know we don't talk about this. I can tell you sometimes I struggle with anxiety. Like sometimes I'll be in a room and it feels like everybody in that room, like there's groups of people and they're all really cool groups and everybody's in a group except for me. Like sometimes I can get caught up in caring what people think about me. And that can make me feel less than happy sometimes. Anybody else ever felt like that? Just you? Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. We all have an intrinsic need not to feel alone. It is powerful. If you ever even slightly care what anybody thinks about you, or you even slightly feel less than happy sometimes, do me a favor right now, real high. Raise your hand for me right now. If you're not on medication, raise your hand. Good. So listen, when I tell you that I have felt like that, and you have felt like that, that's a gift. It connects us, whether you realize it or not. It's a reminder that we're all hanging out with humans. When you raise your hand, you meet my intrinsic need not to feel alone. And it is powerful. It's a gift. And it connects us. And we can start doing things together. We can start a business together. We could write a song together. It forms a friendship. And friends help friends. Friends don't even have to agree with your ideas, but they'll listen to you and they'll follow you because they like you. Friends will give you favor over hundreds of other people with the same qualifications because they trust you. And this works in and out of your business, in and out of your life, in and out of your family, in and out of all of your relationships. Favor. You know, I was in Martha's Vineyard some years back, and I'd been teaching there for about 4 days. And this is the longest I'd ever been away from my boys. My kids today are 13, 9, and 8. Boy, boy, girl. But at the time, I just had my boys, and they were 5 and 1. And my story of the day, you'll hear me talk about your story of the day. Like, what's at the forefront today of your heart and your mind? What's going on in your life today? My story of the day was, I couldn't wait to get home. Inside of that sunroom we couldn't really afford, roll around that extra thick carpet with my 2 boys. I missed them so bad. That was my story of the day. I'm aware every day of what my story is. But I got to the airport and no flights were going out because there was fog everywhere. And it was just pure chaos. And I made my way up to the counter and finally got up to the ticket lady, and she was frustrated. Everybody was frustrated. And she didn't even look up at me. She just said, "What's your name? Where are you headed?" And I said, "James Yeary, Nashville, Tennessee." And then I said, "I can't wait to get home. Roll around the carpet with my boys. I sure do miss them." And she looked up at me as if to say, "Why are you talking to me?" But then she said, "How old are they?" And I said, "They're 5 and 1. She said, "Well, I got grand boys. They're 6 and 2. She said, "Aren't they amazing?" I said, "Yeah, they're incredible. You can't wait to get home to them. And then you can't wait to get away from them." And she laughed. And she handed me a ticket. And this woman that would not even acknowledge me 30 seconds ago was now showing me compassion. She said, "There's no flights going out." I said, "I know." She said, "Good luck." I said, "Thank you." I went and I sat down. About 20 minutes later, a line started forming to get on one of these puddle jumpers and get off of Martha's Vineyard. And everybody was thinking, "Man, what's going on? There's a flight leaving here." And about that time, she came around the counter. And she walked past everybody to the end. And she came to me, and she leaned in, and she whispered, she said, "Do you want to get on this flight?" And I said, "Does Willie Nelson get high?" And that's what I said, really. And she laughed, and she handed me a ticket, and I said, "What is this?" And she said, "They're going to get a flight off of Martha's Vineyard. There's a break in the fog. Don't know if and when they get another one out of here. But they said there was an empty seat." And I told them, "I know, just the guy." She said, "Go home and see your boys." I said, "You got to be kidding me." She said, "Get out of here." So I did. I got mine. I made my connection. And by 7:30 that evening, I was inside of that sunroom, rolling around on that extra thick carpet with my 2 boys. Not because I get the breaks. Good things just happen to me. If I tell you my story, you see your story. I met her intrinsic need not to feel alone in the midst of chaos. I bet you she didn't even think it herself. She didn't even want to hear my story. It took some vulnerability for me to tell her my story. But I know the power of it. And it connected with her. People want to hear your story even when you think they don't. Even when they think they don't. They want to know they're not alone. And like I said, as I'm thinking about any given day, I can tell you what my story of the day is. Because it's powerful. And so as I'm going up to the counter, I want to connect with everybody I can. And you never know when you're going to need a friend. And I didn't, it took a little bit of vulnerability for me. Some people go, hey, Jimmy, I don't want to tell my story. It makes me anxious. It makes me a little anxious, and just to talk to people that I don't want to talk to, or maybe I don't feel like it, maybe they don't feel like it. And networking, I don't want to do it. And it's just, but I want you to understand that you should not, we look at anxiety wrong and vulnerability wrong. You should not be afraid of being a little afraid. Here's what happens. We don't follow superheroes. We're not really impressed with them because we don't connect with them. I can't relate with somebody who's got it all together. But when you come up to me and talk to me and I see some vulnerability, I see a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of fear, I can relate to that. It's valuable. Your expertise, your strength, your knowledge are important. But if you're lacking vulnerability, you're severely lacking. That vulnerability is so powerful. Some years ago, I was with a publisher who understood this so well. Today, this publisher is probably the most powerful man in Nashville. But this was some years ago. We were at a publishing company, and this publishing company was 2 years old, and it had 3 #1 songs to its credit, which is pretty good. 2 years old, 3 #1s. 3 years later, 32 #1 songs. From 3 #1s to 32 #1 songs in 3 years. And people have come up to me over and over and asked me, how did that happen? I mean, I was there. It was just me and 5 other writers, 6 of us. And they go, how did that happen? And I tell them, the day that he came in and he asked us to go in the boardroom, we were all drinking coffee, getting ready for our day to write songs at this relatively new company. And so we went in the boardroom and we was wondering what he wanted to talk to us about. And he got up to the front and he said, hey, I'll make this quick. This is going to be quick. I just want y'all to know that you don't know this about me right now, but I'm going through a situation, a relationship at home. Things are not good for me right now. And there's kids involved, and I feel a little bit kind of like there's a dark cloud over top of me half the time. I know it'll pass. It'll work out one way or another. If you see me and I look down, that's what I'm going through. I love each and every one of you, and I wanted you to know that. If you need me, come get me. I want you to know I'm hurting right now. And that's all I wanted to say to you. And he said, thank you for listening, and he stood up and he walked out. And I had known him 10 years up to that point. I never loved him, connected with him, wanted to rally around him and help him any more than I did in that moment. We all did. And subsequent days were spent going deeper, having deeper conversations around the coffee pot. We became like a family. We started writing deeper, more meaningful songs. And that company exploded with growth. And this song right here was actually one of the songs that I wrote that week, which was a direct result of his vulnerability, of his